Hello and welcome to the Anfield Wrap. It's Harriet Prior hosting this week while Neil is off enjoying his holiday on an island somewhere. He'll still be reading all about football, I'm sure, but you've got me instead. And also alongside me, you've got Neil Docking, we have got Sean Rogers, and we've also got Josh Williams joining us. Thank you all for being with us. It's 41 days, Neil, after Liverpool finished the season away at Southampton, and they're back already. Were you surprised to see all the pictures of smiling faces back at the AXA training centre?
A little bit. I was pleased to see Darwin Núñez chiding everybody in his newfound English.
He's happy with himself, isn't he? You can tell he's learned a few phrases. He's like read a book and he's like, I'm going to use all these on my first
I think it was it Joe Gomez who looked at him like, oh.
Yeah, where did that come from? And the big question though, Josh, is who's going to win the lactate test this year? James Milner is officially off the books. Who is going to step up to the plate and take that role on?
Yeah, well, I'd like to think Núñez will do it. I want Núñez to do well at Liverpool, and he looks in good shape whenever he takes his top off, doesn't he? And I think Gomez does well usually each season, doesn't he? So I think Gomez will probably take it, but I hope Núñez does. I hope we have a new winner.
I read that when Andy Robertson first did it, he was violently sick afterwards.
That'll be me then.
That would be all of us if he tries to.
So I'm hoping he's improved his lactate test game.
It's been a bit of a quiet week, so I thought we'd use the opportunity to do a bit of a state of play, a bit of an assessment of the squad, chat about some of the key players and some of the links that just aren't going away. And to start with, I wanted to do how Liverpool could line up next season, Sean. And this is the best case scenario, I suppose, at the moment, if we don't sign anyone else, if all players are fit. And you kind of are left with a situation with Alisson, Robertson, Van Dijk and Konate in the back line, Trent, Fabinho, McAllister and Szoboszlai as the box four, and then Diaz, Gakpo and Salah. If you look at that starting 11, is there anywhere in that squad that you think, okay, we need an upgrade still, there's still an area I want you to improve on? Or for a starting 11, are you happy with how that looks?
I think a lot is going to depend on who you're playing. In that, I think something you'll see this year with Liverpool potentially is a lot more mix and matching in terms of not only selection, but possibly in terms of system as well. Liverpool's move to building up the play in this back three system with, if you want to call it 3-box-3 or the 3-2-2-3. City have done that for quite a while, on off. Arsenal moved to it very aggressively in the past 18 months and used it last year. So you can look at how those two clubs use it slightly differently and the kind of personnel they use in them roles. But if Liverpool are building the play at home to Sheffield United compared to us going away to Manchester City, would you want that same 11 playing? And would you want to change what you do with the shape? Because something that Man City and Arsenal have both had to move to is whilst they use that same shape with the ball, they defend 4-4-2 pretty much. They certainly press 4-4-2, they press 4-2-4, and quite often they'll drop off, and say you see Haaland and De Bruyne drop off onto the opposition centre mids. With Arsenal, you see it being made Ødegaard and Jesus. Liverpool don't do that. Liverpool have still been defending very much 4-3-3. And me, Neil and Dan have talked about this on a few of the review shows, that in the peak Klopp era, the 4-3-3 defensively covered a hell of a lot of space. But now, so many teams, I mean, even look at Brighton, they're putting centre-backs on the goal line to build the play. Teams are making pitches much bigger, they're playing out. Liverpool are one of the few top clubs that are very rigid in terms of sticking to the 4-3-3 defensive shape. And if you're going to do that, look at Szoboszlai as an example. You know, if you had that as a 4-4-2 defending, you could see him being quite comfortable in that right midfield role. But if you're away to Man City and he's in that role, there's a question mark selection-wise for me. I think with the forwards, there's question marks on all of them. Salah, can he keep doing what he does? We're all pretty confident that he can, but a year ago, no one would think that Fabinho's going to have the 10 minutes that he has at Brighton in January as an example with the rest of the season. So, you know, there's a time when Ian Rush got 42 goals and there's a time when Ian Rush couldn't hit a barn door. Age catches up on everyone, so I don't think that's coming for Salah. But
I don't need this on a Monday morning, mate. The Salah's going to drop off.
But I'm very much glass half. I'm very much glass more than half full. But Diaz, if you play in this system, will he hit big enough numbers in the left wing role? He's more of a left midfielder for me than he is a Mane type there. Gakpo, will he hit the numbers if he's playing in that kind of a role? Núñez, if he plays in that role, will he give you what you need off the ball with the pressing and the defensive work? You know, Jota, can he stay fit? Ultimately, we know he's streaky, but ultimately, can he stay fit long enough? So I think it's more about the systems. I think, you know, the lineup you've just said there, sort of, I don't think that'll be the away to Chelsea one. I think Henderson will take the Szoboszlai role and the internet will just burn down. But
The internet burns down anything to be fair.
but ultimately, that's I think what you would have to do in some of them games early season. But if you're playing Sheffield United at home, there might be a case where you go, well, actually, I'd rather have Nunes up top or Jota up top, and I'll play Gakpo in the where you've named that team there, where McAllister is. Because for 90% of the game, Liverpool are going to be camped in the opposition half in a 3-2-2-3. So actually, if you play Cody Gakpo in that McAllister role, call it, or where Curtis Jones was last year, he's standing in the final third with Jota or Nunes ahead of him. Whereas, if you go away from Man City as an example, you might want a more rigid midfield in there with Gakpo in front. So I also think, to finish off, I do think Liverpool do more 4-4-2 defensively and maybe in that kind of a shape where you look at these lineups and go, wow, this feels like we've got a lot of attackers on the pitch. Because ultimately, Manchester City and Arsenal, who were both defending 4-3-3, have had to change for a reason. Pep's been lining up with 4 centre-backs across the pitch. So 2 top sides deciding that they've got to make them changes. And if you look at Liverpool's squad, if you were a new manager coming in and you hadn't seen Liverpool play, I don't think you think this is a 4-3-3 squad. When you look at it, I think there's, Curtis, if you played 4-4-2, Jones and Diaz fill left-hand side all day. Right-hand side, Szoboszlai would love that. Harvey Elliott would love that. Salah and Trent in different ways could do a job out there. We've got lots of midfielders that you wouldn't want in a 6 on their own, but lots of players who could play in a double pivot that you'd be quite relaxed with. Jota would like to play with someone up top. Nunes played with someone in behind him at Benfica. So I would hope there'd be a bit more 4-4-2.
Yeah, I'm going to start with the forward line then and focus on that a bit more, Neil. So let's start with Gakpo, because for me, he comes in and you're expecting him to be more of a left-sided player, a bit of a left winger and interchange with Diaz. Where he actually ends up is more of a central role. And he seems to enjoy that and grow into that. But do you think that's where he stays looking into next season, ahead of Jota and even Nunes as well?
There's a lot of question marks around the forwards, I think, as alluded to. Yeah, I was of the impression that we were getting a left winger. And so many of the clips I saw was his crossing and how much his crossing game was a big part of his game. And then, he dropped into that sort of false 9 for us. And you saw his ability on the turn with a burst of pace when he picks the ball up deep, turns, and how he could link so well with Salah. And I think in many people's eyes, he's made that central forward role his own to an extent. And I think when you jotted down the team here, you've had him as probably the starting 11, if you think, the first choice 11, if such a thing exists. But I think Darwin Núñez is going to start a lot of games for Liverpool, even at the start of the season. This is a £64 million asset who's got so much potential, and he can change the way we play. He can give us something different. And especially with Trent, we saw when Trent is looking for those balls over the top, Núñez is the one. Núñez is the one who can really make this dynamic, can really change things for us. So I can see them alternating a lot, as Sean said, depending on the opposition and whether we're at Anfield. I think there's going to be a lot of games where Núñez is the one who starts centrally. So I think there'll be a lot of games when Gakpo's on the bench as well, and that they'll be alternating. Same with Jota. Jota, obviously, the fitness issue is the one. But Núñez, you can see him, if he plays centrally with Szoboszlai, which I think is the first time I've said it on the Anfield Wrap.
Right, let's try. Let's all do this together. Szoboszlai.
Right.
I'm sticking with Big Dom.
I think I've even said it wrong and the internet will come for me. So,
but with him and his ability to go wide, right, up high of Salah, and then Salah's ability then to come in field, get closer to goal, and link up in more of a front two with Núñez. We saw their combinations last season. A lot of the best stuff that Darwin did was in combination with Mo. He gets 15 goals still for all his ills and the issues. There's obviously been teething problems, but I think that for me, I think we need to work a way to get him as part of our, if you like, primary 11. Núñez, yeah, because I just think the capability he has is off the chart. We've not seen it, but we've seen it in glimpses. But I think if with coaching and this is exactly what Jurgen relishes. This is what Jurgen loves. He can elevate Núñez's game, I think, to take our attack to a different level. So I'm sort of all in on him still. I'm not saying I have massive admiration for Gakpo and how quickly he settled. It was a big contrast, really, and it seemed within a matter of weeks Gakpo had just come to terms with what was wanted of him and found a way to make the system work. But I think Núñez gives us a really high ceiling if we can, get the best out of his game.
Josh, you all in on him still? Because one of the question marks has been when we switched to the new system, he wasn't getting the game time and wasn't sure if that was because Klopp can trust him in that new role or if he just wasn't getting in ahead of the other players that were being selected. But you said earlier that you've got high hopes for next season. So what are your thoughts on him and also him in the new system?
Yeah, I found myself looking at Neil there with like pure admiration, like Virgil.
You did? I saw it. I was like, wow, this face. I need to carry on this conversation. You were just staring in like pure joy. It was
it was like Jürgen looking at Virgil or something like that. It was. But yeah, I think that what you've just said there is curious though in terms of Núñez. Since we moved towards this kind of 3-2-5, Núñez hasn't really been involved. I think he started once in it. And I think that is weird considering it definitely incorporates his qualities a lot more than the previous system. Like, there's touching on Gakpo being this kind of like new iteration of a false nine and stuff for us. But with this kind of 3-2-5 system, with the ball, there's no real overwhelming need for a false nine because you've got them two kind of advanced eights playing as 10s essentially. So you've got that space occupied by two players almost. So that kind of need on Núñez, which I don't think has benefited them over the past 12 months where you're expecting them to almost drop into the middle a little bit, do a little bit of what Firmino's done for us. I don't think it's made them look particularly good. So if you've got two lads behind them doing that for them almost, you can keep them almost away from the ball, tell them to stretch the defensive line, run in behind. As a result of that, you take defenders with you. You create space for the likes of Szoboszlai, McAllister, Jones, Henderson if he's playing the role. So I think, and you got to look at it as well, I think stylistically, I think Núñez is very similar to Haaland personally in terms of like they're both rapid, both very tall, physical, not particularly too technical in terms of like a possession game and stuff like that, and they just kind of want to finish the move for you almost. So if you look at how Pep has incorporated Haaland, it's the same shape Liverpool have now got. I think Núñez has had to improve defensively above all else, and I think he needs to learn the language and stuff. Hopefully he's doing that, and if he's got that nailed, and if he kind of improves his defensive game over the summer, I can see Núñez being the main man next season. Because I think it's interesting that we've given out these shirts so far. Núñez hasn't got the 9 yet, and I think maybe Klopp's kind of almost working out how he looks this summer, and with a view to having this platform now for him to do what he's good at next season.
Yeah, I'll come back to you and just finish off the forward line because you mentioned there he'll have an increased role. Do you think that takes over some of the games that Firmino is playing in throughout the season? Like, is there a need for a replacement for Firmino when you've got other players that you think will come through and play more games?
Yeah, I think there is a need for a replacement for him in the sense of Gakpo. I think you don't always want to be tied to this fixed approach, and I think Núñez is very, very different to what we've had in the past. Sometimes you do want that central player if you do move towards more of a 4-3-3. With the ball, which we haven't done for the past 10 games. Maybe you do want that player who's a bit more compact, a bit more inclined to drop into the 10 spaces and stuff, not like Núñez. And I think Gakpo anyway will never be a problem for you because, you've said there he can play on the left, he can play as the 9. I think I agree with Sean, I think he can play as the left side of the 8. So within the 3-box-5, the 3-box-3 system anyway. So I think we've got options there with what we've signed over the past 12 months.
It's massive pre-season straight away for him because, shameless plug, but Neil put some stuff together for one of our video shows on the app, and Núñez's attacking numbers, when you look at StatsBomb percentile, are elite. Now, it doesn't feel like that last year because of how raw he was and numbers and things, but you would think that if he did those sort of percentiles again across the board, you would think it would revert to mean and get more numbers. His defensive work is horrific, which is mad because you look at him, how good his attitude is, but his pressing numbers are horrific. His gegenpressing numbers are horrific. Now, in comparison, Firmino's ridiculous. Jota's last season, ridiculous. Diaz, ridiculous. Gakpo, ridiculously good. Salah's not great. But I think he gets a bit of a pass in the way Liverpool set the system up. So when Klopp was saying gegenpress and get you into the team, that's why he's not had a look. Yeah. And I don't think Klopp will have him anywhere near the gaff unless he sees in these friendlies that has been corrected.
Yeah, the forward line was meant to be the easy part, and we've already had a good discussion on it, so we will move into midfield. And it was a pretty comprehensive email that Neil Atkinson, other Neil, sent out last week, just looking at the midfield in particular, and he split them into the new lads, obviously McAllister and Szoboszlai, the old lads, Henderson, Fabinho, Thiago, and the younger ones, Elliott, Jones and Bajcetic, which leaves us, Neil, with 8 midfielders competing for 3 spots, and one of them you presume, this is alongside Trent, by the way, so these are the other ones, and if Liverpool play all the games, i.e. they get to a Europa League final, in the league and across Europe, they'll play 51 games. He's worked that out. He's done the maths for me. I don't even need to. I just wrote this down. 153 starts shared between currently 8 players. It's less than 20 each if you split between all those players I've mentioned. Now, you'd look at the names I've just said and you'd ask any of them if they'd feasibly be happy with 20 starts, and you're probably getting a yes from maybe Bajcetic, maybe Elliott. It feels like actually we've gone from a place where the midfield was such a big problem to now balancing the needs of all of them and their strengths and getting the best out of them is going to be a bigger problem.
Yeah, possibly. Before we start, I'm not going to refer to Fabinho as one of the old lads. He's 29, and I feel like a hypocritical person if I call a 29-year-old man
of the squad.
a veteron.
They've been there, you know,
yeah, no, I know.
and they're not Curtis
I'm only
Jones.
joking. But no, I did read Neil's email. I thought it was interesting. I do have to say that the minutes on the pitch, the game time that these lads are going to get isn't my primary concern as a supporter. I want to see Liverpool win games. I want to see the team excel. And I think that the cream rises to the top and they've got to force their way into the side. And so I think it's laying down a gauntlet to the players. If you want game time, then you've got to show it in training. You've got to prove that you belong in the team. I do think Harvey Elliott, Bajcetic, I think Curtis Jones to an extent. I mean, are we talking 20 league games or are we talking in all competitions?
I think across both, yeah.
Yeah,
well, Europa League, it doesn't count the cup competition.
Yeah, that's where it becomes difficult. I mean, Bajcetic obviously is currently injured. I'm not quite sure on the return date. But the biggest thing for me is that we've seen with this midfield that...
I think he's back, Andy's saying.
Oh, is he already back? Okay. We've seen with the... With the squad we've got currently, that a number of them are injury prone and a number of them can't be relied on to start 2 or even 3 games in a week. So I think there's question marks against all of them in terms of whether they're at the level that we need in midfield or whether they're going to be available enough in midfield. So personally for me, there's 8 of them, isn't there? I think there's room for another without a doubt. I think you have to think of some of the players like Bajcetic. He's 18 years old. I don't think he's going to be, storming and banging on Jurgen Klopp's door demanding why he's not starting more than 20 games in all competitions at the age of 18. I think Harvey Elliott is aware of his place in the squad. I think there's a lot of game time with the Europa League. There's going to be a lot of rotation. I think across the midfield, the veteran players, the players we should be able to count on, they're the ones who are arguably the most injury prone and have got the most questions. Obviously, last season, we weren't happy with the performances for one reason or another of any of the veteran 3. So I think we certainly need to be looking to bring in another midfielder, and a game time for our existing players isn't any concern of mine, I have to say.
Yeah, and that other midfielder is the one name that is being linked at the moment is Lavia, and I'll just provide an update on that because Florian Pettenberg, the Sky Germany reporter, said at the weekend talks between Liverpool and Lavia are concrete and ongoing. Understand there is no agreement in terms of salary conditions yet. His price tag is around 50 million. Klopp wants him, a very press resistant player, even in high pressure situations. He loses the ball only 1 out of 10 times. Take away the context for a minute, Josh, of how often he'd play and whether he'd come in ahead of someone like Bajcetic and block a path or whatever. But as a player, as a footballer, would you like to see him come to Liverpool?
I like him as a player. I think he's got obvious qualities, and you've got to factor in that he's just played a full Premier League season for the worst team in the league. At the age of 19, I think he is. So I think for me, the big thing with Lavia is he's got the raw materials to be something that's pretty good by the time he reaches the age of like a McAllister now, for example, 5 years ahead of him. I think he can be a ball winner for Liverpool, but one who can also play, one who can dribble himself out of tricky situations and things like that. I don't like the price. I think the price is far too steep. It's difficult to remove the context that you've just said for me personally, because I am naturally inclined to think, where's he getting minutes? And I can see why the kind of line on it is we need to let someone go first before we get Lavia in, personally. Because I think the 2 lads that we've got in so far, obviously we lost 3 in Milner, Naby and Ox, but the 2 that we've got in feature it all the time in terms of the last season. At least they don't pick up injuries from what we've seen so far. There are prime years of performance and stuff. I think off the top of my head, McAllister featured in 34 out of 38 Premier League games last season. I think Szoboszlai featured in 31 of 34 Bundesliga games. So you've got two really available lads here who are going to want to be playing every week. And I think the more seasoned ones who have got them question marks on them, like a Henderson potentially, they shouldn't be overly relied upon to be starting anyway because of these new lads that we're getting in. So, yeah, going back to the original question, I do like Lavia, but it's not one of them for me where it's like a real, we need them to challenge or anything like that. Or I feel a bit whatever on that one, if I'm honest. As in, if it happens, I'll find a way to look at the positives of it. But if it doesn't happen, I'll just kind of shrug my shoulders, you know what I mean?
I thought I read that he's only played something like 20 games, actually, at this stage.
He was out with injury for a period of last season.
Yeah, and he is very young.
Yeah, I think he started
19.
about 22, 24 games for Southampton last season in the Premier League. So
I'm really encouraged listening to, I thought it was a fascinating chat you had with, is it Lucy Hynett?
Yes.
Who was talking about his abilities. And I certainly think he sounds like a really interesting prospect. But I wonder if his age profile is exactly what we need. I'm not sure if we need a more experienced player coming in, if they're going to be a direct replacement over the next few months for Fabinho. It seems like a big ask, but then all the Southampton fans and pundits and journalists were all saying they thought within 3 or 4 months he would be ready to replace Fabinho. So maybe that's me underestimating his level and how far ahead he is at his age.
Well, that's the other thing you've just mentioned there about replacing Fabinho. For me, he's a slightly different kind of player to Fabinho. For me, I view Fabinho as a fixed holding player who kind of like doesn't really go chasing the ball, but does regain it for you often by like almost just reading the plays, and he provides that fixed holding presence for Fabinho. Whereas I view Lavia as a bit more of a hunter of the ball almost. And he's played at Southampton in a double pivot. Sean mentioned earlier about like we've got a lot of these double pivot players coming in, and I think Lavia offers obviously some defensive perks and stuff like that, and he fits the kind of player who would benefit you most without the ball rather than with it. But I don't know if he's a Fabinho, heir to the throne for me. I think he's a bit different than that. That's not a problem. I think he's got a versatile skill set and he can become whatever Klopp wants him to be almost if he did come to Liverpool. But I don't know if I view him as a Fabinho long-term successor or anything like that personally.
Long-term successor for you, Sean? The concern for me is the money thing which you mentioned, and Southampton can hold firm on that because Manchester City do have a buyback clause for 40 million, so there's no way that they're going to let him go. You'd expect for less than that, thinking that they might be able to get 40 for him next season. The other concern for me is that it does block a path for Bajcetic because they're similar age players, similar positions you think they'd be playing, even if their attributes aren't exactly the same. So what do you think about him coming in?
I disagree slightly. I think he's close to being in the must category for me. Klopp hasn't used his 5 subs well, and there's mitigating circumstances on that. For someone who called for them forever, and to then, it's sod's law, isn't it, that you're then one of the worst managers at using them. However, I think it's not a problem until you get to late January. Klopp normally always, March onwards, sticks with a group of lads and just runs them into submission at that point. But you look at Europa League, League Cup, FA Cup and the 5 subs. If Liverpool are 3-0 up or even 2 up against Bournemouth at home, cruising, you just take Fabinho off and put him in, don't you? And you go, there's 20 minutes to help learn the ropes of what you've been doing. Europa League game, we've got all them group games. Okay, you need to win the first couple to get up a bit of run of steam. But again, half an hour here, another game there, League Cup ties. Before you get to January, they've had a load of training, they've had a load of minutes. And with the use of the 5 subs, if you think of rugby union, what they would do, and I'm not a rugby fan, so I'll get this wrong, but you would have like your 3 props or whatever it would be, 3 centre midfielders. And in theory, you'd run them for 45 minutes and sub them all at half time, wouldn't you? If they were of the same quality and the same metrics, you'd put 90 minutes run into 45 minutes and sub them at half time and go, I've still got 2 subs up my sleeve. So I don't think it's an issue for you, Bajcetic and Lavia. There's a question mark about where Bajcetic might fit in the squad. And same for Fabinho if Liverpool don't bring someone in, because if Liverpool are going to be wedded to this build-up system that they're using, if Trent is out of form or injured, what do Liverpool do? Now, there's an argument that Fabinho could do it as a right-sided centre-back, filling at right-back. Has he got the legs anymore to do it? Could he be exposed for pace there? Is that something you want him to do? Could you use Bajcetic there? Maybe. But again, that's a real big experiment if you're going to do that. So Liverpool have got a few little tactical question marks, but might fit them in. In terms of Lavia, I think, how many players around Europe are you going to find that look like they could be one of the best number sixes around? They've got Premier League experience. They've come up through the Manchester City academy. It seems that they want to come. You've got a chance to learn off Fabinho and learn the ropes. Obviously, the big problem is that not only does Southampton have this £40 million release clause next year, there's a 20% buyback to 20% sell-on clause to City this year. So if I'm Southampton, I'm saying you've got to give me 48 mil to off, because I can get 40 next year. Why should I take less than 40 mil now? And I think this is where Liverpool have been clever on two fronts. I think Liverpool have been ruthless this summer and got loads of players to commit to coming. And Liverpool have given them the impression they're signing for us. And Liverpool are just seeing what the best deals they can do is, because I think they're trying to free up as much budget for Colwell as possible. I think the plan all along is to get Colwell to cause as much of a stink as he can to free up as much budget for a big one. And even if it's not him, I think Liverpool know the way dominoes might fall this summer. There could be a late option in the market. And I think they need Lavia to be pretty minging, to be honest. They need him to be like going on strike levels. And I do think that's where I honestly think Liverpool will be saying that, saying, look, we can't do a deal of 48 million for you, but we can do a deal of 34 million for you. And this isn't going to happen unless, because they know they're not going to have him.
Yeah.
For next season.
They do. All the fans we've spoken to have a real acceptance that he can't be playing in the Championship if that's not what he wants. But if they think
he might go to, if he says, I'll go to Chelsea then, well, they'll just come in and give him 480 mil, won't they, with their mad set of gang of lads at the top with Todd. So he needs to go. It's Liverpool or nothing, and I'm going to sit on my arse and do nothing for you. So you need to get on the phone to Mike Gordon and do a deal right now.
That's why it's interesting to talk about Thuram around, is it 26 million mark? Is newspaper reports are saying that needs to be prepared to accept 26 million for him. If we're going to have to find 50 million for Colwell, maybe more, to prize him away from Chelsea, then are we in a position to sign him and Lavia for 40 million plus? 40 million plus. I
was going to say, I think the question is Thuram, are you bringing him in and he's just fulfilling what you've already got in the players you've brought in and the ones that already exist? Like Lavia offers something different in terms of he is a six. He can be moulded into the position, like you said earlier, Josh, and it feels like he'd be a prospect for the future, and you're buying the potential, but then how much does that leave over if you do want a defender, which I think most of us agree that we do.
But who's to say that Jurgen isn't looking at Thuram and thinking he's a player I can mould into something different to play different? He's 6'4". He covers an extraordinary amount of ground. He's maybe more of a hunter, more of that sort of profile again.
Possibly, yeah. Everyone loves the fact that he's 6'4", don't they? It's definitely a Premier League thing, not like a Liverpool thing.
It's got to be. Because
there's a massive problem, though. I just don't think he's very good.
Thuram? Yeah, I'm
good.
not massively high on either of them, if I'm honest. Lavia and Thuram. I like both of them to a level, but like it's for neither of them. It's reached the point where I'm like, get them in or bust. It's not. I don't think it's like that. I personally, but
I heard Pete Bolster talking the other day about how he'd love a Mascherano type. Like obviously, wouldn't we all love a Javier Mascherano type? One of the best defensive midfielders of all time. But he was about 5'9". So it says it all, really, doesn't it? With this obsession with height, I think it's just a bit of a buzzword, isn't it?
He's 6'4". He must be good. Josh, a player I'm hoping you're going to be more positive about is Curtis Jones. And for all the talk of Liverpool looking at the Euros under 21s and seeing who they want to buy and scouting out players, one of the standouts has been him. He scores the goal, slightly odd goal in the final, and he came out as the man of the match as well. What did you make of him in the tournament, but also how he feels like he's really come into his own, not just during this tournament, but towards the end of the season for Liverpool?
Yeah, it feels like a real coming of age for Curtis Jones at the minute. I actually think he could really challenge next season. He's done absolutely nothing to be deserving of a spot on the bench on the first game of next season, apart from potentially if he comes back late, because he's just played the Euros. But as a player, he's really evolving, and I think he's always had them raw materials that I mentioned earlier about Lavia, in terms of just like, close ball control, and he's quite physical himself. He's really mobile. His counter press has improved so much.
He's tall.
He's tall, yeah. I think he's just had to do it on a consistent basis, and I think specifically this switch at the beginning of April to this 3-2-5 with possession, I think has benefited him massively, because he's no longer been expected to be this kind of like controlling presence on the left Liverpool's midfield. He's now able to like play the majority of the game in the final third, and essentially do what he's good at. He's chipped in with the odd goal compared to Henderson on the opposite side. As I said, his pressing's been superb. So I think this coming season, there's this line, everyone hates the line, don't they? It'll be like a new signing. And I hate saying it myself, but I think in Curtis Jones, if he can stay fit at least, I definitely think it applies to him in that sense.
Yeah, and he was asked, Neil, whether he was concerned, or I don't know how they phrased the question, but about new midfielders coming in. And he suggested he's ready. He's ready to compete for those spots. He wants to be able to show that the shirt is his. He's ready to step up to the plate. And when we spoke about the counter-pressing being a ticket into the team, a lot of that was in relation to why Klopp was selecting Curtis Jones towards the end of last season. He works really hard. He always puts in the groundwork. And the play and how he was performing was matching up to that as well. So do you see his role being diminished next season with the new players coming in, or do you think he's going to be ready to step up to it and prove why he should be part of that starting 11 most weeks?
Not if he's fit. If he's fit and available, then I think he'll. The shirt's his currently. I was trying to look at you with the same admiration you were looking at me earlier when you were talking about Curtis, because I agree with every word of it. I think he's got so much potential. And one of the things that he's got, which I've always admired about him, is just supreme confidence. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest that he backs himself to be the man for us next year, because he's always had that about him. He was a big part of turning us around. People talked about Trent and Trent's form in the run-in, but Curtis is... And already it's been dismissed in some quarters, he came in for a few games and he was average. He wasn't. He came in for a few games. The first maybe 2 or 3, he was finding his feet, but then I thought he was genuinely excellent for the last 4 or 5 games of the season. So I think he's got a massive role to play. It's just a question of keeping him fit and then finding what best suits him in this new system. Because it's interesting in the tournament, the Euros, he's sometimes been deployed a little deeper, hasn't he?
Yeah.
And so I think it's a question of whether that's something he can do for us, or whether then we're losing out the other way, because his late runs into the box, his timing, his ability to finish. That's something that I love to see as well. But he's such a versatile player that I think if he's fit and available, you're going to find a way to get him into the team and around the matchday squad.
Yeah, we got the chance to speak to Steven Gerrard a couple of weeks ago about Curtis Jones. We're actually going to be putting that out for free tomorrow, so you can watch out for that. It's a really good piece of audio, so do listen out for that. But before we move on to talk about the old guys aren't actually that old, as Neil Docking has pointed out, we're going to pass over to Neil Jones and Neil Atkinson talking about his Substack.
Joined by Neil Jones to talk about his Substack, which he started to do, writing about Liverpool's players now, potential transfers, and hopefully the season to come. I think you picked a great year for it. I want to read your thing immediately after the first pre-season game, what they did, who covered for Trent when he went off, what it looked like, all of that sort of stuff. I think you picked a great moment to go for it.
Yeah, do you know what? Not deliberately, to be fair. I've got lucky.
It was forced upon you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But out of trouble comes opportunity, doesn't it? As they say. But I actually agree. I've been saying this to a few people recently. I think this is the most interesting pre-season Liverpool have had, probably since Jürgen's first one.
Yeah.
Just so many uncertainties. We've always... I think the only question we've really had going into the season is sort of, can Liverpool be up with City, isn't it? Now we've got so many other questions about what's the new players going to look like, what's some of the younger players coming through,
what's the shape
of the team, how far have some of the established players fallen, So, yeah, I think it's... I hope you're right. Anyway, I hope it is as interesting as I think it's going to be. I think it could be a good one, and hopefully I'll have plenty to write about and talk about.
It is a bold move. I think full stop. We're reaching a point, I think, where online content. I mean, the Anfield Wrap, this is a free show that people are watching this off, but there's a paid element to it, and the ability to do it, and have the independence to do it, and the freedom to do it, comes from the fact that ordinary people pay for it, and you're always grateful for that, and I'm sure for the support you have been so far, you are grateful.
100%.
But it's one of those things where the more the support is, the greater your independence is.
Yeah.
And I think that's because you are so engaged in the Liverpool world, the more independent you feel as though you can be, the more you can contribute to everything.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I had a little bit of a wrestle with it. Obviously, the situation, as I've said, was forced upon you. So you're sort of having to reevaluate where you are. You've not got that full-time job, which has been my thing for 12, 13 years.
Yeah.
Covering Liverpool for 5 of it in particular, but for the previous 8 covering Merseyside sport. So you sort of go from that to okay, what can you do? And I did have this wrestle of am I too painted in a little bit into this world, where I couldn't go and write about Everton now, or could I possibly go and write about another sport or whatever? Have I sort of boxed myself in a bit? And then I think more and more what you're finding in the world is I think niche is almost good at the moment. You know, I think having a sort of a narrow focus. You know, you see, just in the football world, you see so many people who find themselves in this now. That they're a tactical writer, or they're a statistical, analytical writer. Transfer specialists, obviously, huge at this time of year in particular. So I think using that as a strength as opposed to a weakness. I was worried, to be honest, starting off. I was thinking, do you know what? I was even thinking about, with Twitter name, for example, Neil Jones Goal. I was thinking, change that to Neil Jones LFC. It was available. Thought, I don't know, because then you look a little bit like you sort of, you can't do anything else.
I think Neil Jones Goal just says you hit your targets.
You know what I reached double figures this season.
It's John Gibbons' blog. That's okay. Where's the blog, John?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, indeed. I mean, Ian Doyle Sport is one. I think. Come on, Ian.
Pushing the envelope.
Yeah. He's got rugby league a little bit, but not really. But yeah. So I think having that sort of making that commitment to right, I'm sticking with this. I'm gonna carry on down this road. I think it can sort of, it can lead to some problems potentially, but actually what I've found so far is I think people are like, good on you, like I think there's been a lot of great support. I've had a lot of comments, people messaging. I mean, I've actually offered people I know, sort of, listen, I'll give you the comp sign up, because you're a friend, and they're like, no, I'd rather support you, and that, you can't ask for more than that really, in terms of, it's a very new venture, it's 2 weeks into it, so far so good, and fingers crossed Liverpool don't let me down.
They're not going to let you down, because I think, no, as I say, I think there is so much, the idea of being able to, and again, I find it, and I do it in a very, at times, flowery or nonsensical or somewhat drunk, if we're all honest way, when I write post-match, but what I sort of like is, there's no expectations. Like, you can pick the thing that most grabs you from a game, whether it's a pre-season game or through the season, you can focus on that. You can, if you want to wait for the manager's quotes, you can wait for the manager's quotes. If you want to get it out straight away, you can. I think that freedom, and away from the conventional norm of, well, this is what you've got to do because this is the way we do it across the rest of this.
Yeah.
I think that must be so exciting.
I think so. Certainly for matches, and we haven't had a match yet, have we? So that's to come. But I think that really does appeal to me. This idea that you're not sort of bashing out. And let's be fair on this. I'm not bringing Ben Johnson into this at all. But when I do match ratings, they go and they're sort of, I can read them back 20 minutes after the match is finished and think, you know what, I didn't really say what I needed to say there. Or, you're doing it live and you're not really focusing. The idea that you can let something breathe, or you can sort of run with an idea that maybe would just be unheard of in a newspaper or on a conventional website, like you say, I think it does appeal. And I think the other thing I've noticed is when I speak to people, and where I sit at Anfield, and where I'll hopefully continue to sit at Anfield in the press box, it's right next to the walkway out of the main stand. So I get fans all the time just wanting to chat, have a look at the team sheet, what do you think, just what transfers, this and that. But the amount of people who say to me, so who'd you work for again? They know who I am, they know my name, but they don't know who I work for. And I think, well, in a way, that's sometimes you'd be like, well, that's a bit weird. But actually, when you think about it, it's like, well, actually, it's quite endearing, isn't it? It means that they're reading you, don't they? They're not reading the website, and so that gives you the chance to actually give them a bit more of what they're already looking for, if you like. A bit more of you and a little less of the the sort of the organisation that you're writing for, or the restrictions that maybe they'll come for. So, yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, I think it's going to be a challenge, obviously, because, like you say, I mean, you just mentioned you guys, but there's Red Men, there's this is Anfield, there's Anfield. Yeah. There's so many people who are focused on Liverpool and making great content and great livings out of it. So it is a tough market, but I think the way I'll do it, I think has a place definitely, and well, so far so good anyway in terms of people reacting to it.
So where do people find it? Do that one down the camera, put Charman style. Do that one down the camera.
Charman style, Andy Gray style. So Substack.com/Neil J, and that's the page. That'll take you to there. You can get a 7-day free trial, which will get you all the content. After that, you've got the choice whether you want to pay. It's £3.50 a month, which was the bare minimum I could charge. That's honestly, I didn't pick that. It does feel like a strange thing to choose, but it was the bare minimum that Substack would allow me to charge per month. Or you can sign up yearly, which is £30 a month, £30 a year. So that's a saving of what, £5? Yeah.
There we are. It's important to support this stuff, and many of you who are seeing this will also support the Anfield Wrap, and we are very grateful for that. But the idea that people can be independently minded and therefore supported by people such as yourself, if you are watching this, it really matters. It allows that independence of voice. I'm all over it. Obviously, I'm biased. I'm also biased that I think Neil's great. I've signed up. I didn't even ask him for a free code. I've signed up myself, sorted it out, really enjoying it. Do check out the Substack. It is the business. Let's get back over to the main show.
Yeah, thank you to Neil Jones and to Neil Atkinson. They're back in the room now. And Sean, let's talk about the older guys. We'll start with Fabinho.
I like the fact you came to me on the older guys.
No, it was nothing personal. There was no intention behind it. He starts 38 games last year, really buys into the fact that we weren't getting the best out of our players last season. And you'd think that that's not going to be something that's replicated next year.
Hopefully not. Fabinho and Henderson have been leathered, haven't they, the past few seasons?
And everyone's surprised they've got no legs.
Fabinho's a funny one. There seems to be no middle ground with Brazilians. They either seem to go on forever until like the late 30s, or they're burnt out in the like late 20s. Like, this is one for the kids, but a lot of good Brazilian midfielders burn out quickly. It's worth, these lads are playing futsal when they're about 3 months old. Like, they play serious football. A lot of them are playing first team, 16, 17, 18. And in Fabinho's case, I don't think it's so much the length of time he's been playing games like some of the players have. But it's worth remembering, although these are different positions, like Robbie Fowler and Michael Owen are at their peak by the time they were 22. So this thing of, well, he's 28, 29, he must have loads of legs left. Well, I don't know. It's player specific, isn't it? And in Fabinho's sense, there's got to be huge question marks there. So I think you have to start the season wrapping him up in cotton wool for certain. I think Jordan Henderson's got a big problem, more so tactically with this system, because if they stick with the system that we've been referencing during the show, Szoboszlai and Harvey Elliott are a better fit against weak opposition to play that role than he is. For the Josh was referencing, Henderson just doesn't give you the numbers in that role. But at the start of the season, I was really disappointed. He was carrying an injury and his hamstring goes, doesn't it, early season. And it's great that he was getting himself on the pitch when he shouldn't have been. But ultimately, his defensive work and his lack of aggression was appalling. Brighton at home, terrible. United away, terrible. Tracking runners, terrible. Zonal marking, terrible. He hasn't got that Milner aggression. Because if he did, you'd think he could be the Trent backup. You think he could really be the Milner role. But
I was going to say that, to be fair.
You'd be concerned of Henderson going into the right-back zone, because Henderson's someone who defends like shadowing. Do you know what I mean? Like, he shadows, he jockeys, he looks to nip in. He's a really good presser for those reasons, because he gets in and reads things. He's not someone who really gets in like a Milner does against a winger and gives him a reducer. Goes, well, how good? Milner basically hits you in the first minute and goes, how good are you with a limp? Now we can both run at the same pace. Yeah. Whereas Henderson would just probably applaud you and go, oh, I really like your skill. Let's go the te-a-te. So I think Henderson's got. And would you want him in the 6? Not based on what you saw last year. So I'm a massive Jordan Henderson fan, but I do think he's got a problem tactically there. And in terms of Thiago, I think his role, like a few of the players in the squad, are more flat trap bullies. I think if you're playing Bournemouth and Sheffield United at home in Europa League games, I think you can play Thiago in the 6. He played it for Bayern Munich, because ultimately you've just got the ball, haven't you? And if you've got 3 behind you, particularly if it's Konate and Van Dijk being 2 of that 3, then if Thiago is a little bit off it against weaker opposition, you'd like to think the security you've got behind you there can cover you. Would you want to see that in like competitive away games? Of course not. So I certainly think Thiago and Fabinho can be wrapped up in cotton wool and put into the games. It is, though, going to need... McAllister and Szoboszlai have got to hit the ground running for that to happen, haven't they? Like, we're all assuming they're going to stay fit. But, they've got Jurgen Klopp pre-season ahead of them for the first time. And we do like breaking players. So
positivity once again. We're coming through with it on a Monday morning. Do you share the same tactical concerns about Henderson, Josh?
In a way, yeah. I think he's definitely got a problem when it comes to the role he occupied towards the end of the season. The right side of number 8, I agree. I think Harvey Elliott's a better fit. Szoboszlai's a better fit. For me, you do not want Henderson in what is essentially an attacking bank of 5, really. You want him in the safety net, the bank of 5 at the back. So I think he could do the 6 when Fabinho is maybe not there, not ready to play or something like that. Or I think Henderson's always done that to an okay level. I don't think he's an elite 6 or anything like that, but I think he can do it as cover. And I think the right back thing for me, if you look at the players in the squad, I think it's a difficult profile to fill in at the inverted fullback role, but I think Henderson, he's obviously got the centre midfield profile attached to him. He's been a centre midfielder his whole career. A lot of his career he spent covering Trent in those wide right back areas anyway. I think he's the only player in the squad, I think I'm right in saying this, who was there when Klopp arrived. I think he's the only player with that now. So he's obviously got Klopp's kind of game ingrained into him now as well. Very seasoned, lots of experience. So I think if Liverpool had a relatively comfortable fixture and Henderson was playing as a right back without the ball and as part of a double pivot next to Fabinho when we've got the ball, I think he could do that as cover. So cover-wise, I think he can play technically 3 positions in the right side of 8, the 6 and the inverted fullback. But that's just cover. I don't think he can... I wouldn't necessarily want him starting in any of them. And Thiago, I think, is a bit more even limited than that. I think Thiago, for me, is just the 6. And that would be when Liverpool are the much stronger team and there's no onus on Liverpool to break down a block, essentially. But other than that, the pair of them, that's the issue you've got at hand, I suppose. You've got 2 big earners there who are no longer starters, and one of them especially can only cover one position. So that's the interesting thing going into the rest of the summer, because there's rumours of like Saudi with Henderson and same with Thiago as well with Galatasaray and things like that. So it's an interesting one to see what we do like.
You're getting a tactical special on the Anfield Wrap this week. I hope you're all enjoying it. I definitely am. Thiago is the name that has been mentioned, Neil, with a move away, whether it is, I don't think he wants a move to Saudi by the reports that are coming out, or somewhere else, so you don't know where that would be. He's 32 years old in the final 12 months of a 4-year deal. Starting off the summer, it would have felt unfeasible that you'd let Thiago go. Do you think now you'd feel like it would make financial sense, or do you still want to hold on to him because he's such a lovely player to have involved in the squad when he is available?
He's a supreme footballer. There's no doubt about that. You talk about playing him when we're against weak opposition at home, like Manchester United.
Exactly like Manchester United, yeah.
I mean, some of the performances we've seen from him over the last few years have been at a level that we've rarely seen from any midfielder in a red shirt. But obviously there's been issues about being far too infrequent, and that sometimes is he a player that gilds the lily? Is he a player that necessarily suits what we need, week in, week out? I think there's a case to be made for selling any of the 3 veteran players at this stage in their Liverpool career. If you're looking at like a dispassionate, what would a sensible club do at this stage, where you've got 3 players who are, despite what I said about Fabinho earlier, he's 29, Henderson's 33, Thiago's 32. Henderson has 2 years left on his deal. Thiago's got 1. I think that Fabinho is with us for another 3 years or so. I think he's got the longest contract remaining. But at some point, you have to sell good players, and you have to think of the right time to sell, and you have to try and get some money in for them, because there's business we want to do, and we've got to fund that. And so if you were to look at the squad, I think all 3 of those could attract fees, sizable fees. Now, I'm not saying we should go out and sell Jordan Henderson. I'm not saying that I think we should sell Fabinho when he's the only player really that fits the profile of a holding midfielder that we've got currently in the squad. But what I'm really saying is that from a sensible point of view, I think you've got to look at selling one of them and recouping some money. And so I guess that's why people are naturally falling on Thiago, because he's the one who, since he's been here, has only featured in 50% of the games, who we think could command a good fee, and the fact that he's the 2nd or the 3rd highest earner at the club. So that's what it points towards. But I don't think it's as simple as saying, oh, well, one of the Saudi sides will come in and thank you very much, wave him off, because it seems that he doesn't want to go there. And why should he? He still obviously feels that he can play at a really high level, and he's got a lot to contribute. I'm interested in the Galatasaray links as a man who's just been on holiday to Turkey. I can advise Thiago that it's a fabulous place. We'll eat well and enjoy the sunshine. But I do think that if we want to remodel the squad, and we don't want to get into basically the position the last couple of years is there's not been enough regeneration of the midfield. There clearly hasn't, and players have left and not been replaced. So at some stage you've got to look to move on, your veteran stars. So I think one of them probably does need to leave the club this summer, and that's not so much of an indictment on them or their ability or their quality. It's not really about that. It's just about a healthy, regeneration of what we've got.
Yeah, he's not managed to play more than 25 games in any single campaign, Sean. And reasonable to say, though, that whenever he has been available, Klopp does want to use him. He sees him maybe as more of a luxury player, but he's always in and around that starting team when he is fit and available.
It's worth remembering when the wheels really were falling off last year, where none of us really wanted to watch another Liverpool game. Like, he could have easily dropped out with the knocks that he had, and he turned up. And he's a proper winner, and he showed a proper winner's mentality. And when the chips were down, he was lining up in midfield with Harvey Elliott and Batatic, and it was a complete car crash going on around him. And he really, I think, showed great mentality, but also great performance in the situation that he ended himself up in, I guess. But I'd like him to stay, purely for the fact that I think if he's banging form and things are going well, you can go to the young pups and say, listen, he's off in the summer, so bide your time, learn from him, or guess what, train better and take his shirt. But for now, he's doing the business. I think, it's such a fine line winning trophies, any of them, to have the ability to just bring him off the bench with 20 minutes to go. If you look at any of the three you're discussing, who are still younger than me, but the old guys, as we've been referencing them, he's the only difference. He's the one that's the difference maker. He's the one that if you need a goal in a final and you bring him on with 20 to go, or he might not get you the goal, but the opposition aren't going to want him on the ball. He's the one that can give the ball to the people in tight spaces that you need. So I think he could be this sounds ridiculous, but almost like a Gary Mack type. Look, you've got 1 year left. Let's win as much as we can in this 1 year. I think he'd almost be a man possessed. Because of the reasons you've given, he's going to have a carrot dangling at the end of the year where he's got one big move, irrelevant of where he wants to go, for a massive payday. But he's going to want to earn that, isn't he, at the highest level? Like, you'd imagine he's got an eye on Barcelona, thinking, with Barcelona's money problems, if I go there on a free, I can go, Barcelona have still got to want him, though. So he's still got to deliver a certain level of performance this season, if that's what I imagine he's got his eye on. So, yeah, I would love him to stay. As I say, I think with so many new players coming in and everything, you need Henderson around, as much as people hate saying it, just for off the pitch as much as anything else. But I think if there's one on the pitch that you could cash your chips in, I think it's Henderson, but that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, Josh, we'll finish off then on the midfield, looking at the two new players that have come in, McAllister and Szoboszlai. And McAllister's a player with incredible positional flexibility, so you'd have to think that's where he's getting a lot of his starts, playing across the midfield. He can do so many different roles. And then obviously a 60, 70 million pound acquisition in Szoboszlai. Oh my God, I'm saying it differently now every time I say it. We really need to just do a show and just be saying it for 10 minutes and see how we get on. But it is reasonable to say that they'll be looking, both from a club perspective and a player perspective, to get around 30 starts each across the course of the season. Yeah,
and I think they can expect that. I think that's the only thing, going back to what you said earlier, Neil, about Curtis Jones and the shirt should be his and things like that. If you look again, going back to this system that we keep referencing, for me, McAllister's in direct competition with Jones for that kind of left side of number 8 role. And I think McAllister's very, very, very versatile, but mostly plays on the left of a midfield. Doesn't really ever play on the right, and can play as part of a double pivot, but you got to bear in mind our holding 6 becomes a lone 6 when we kind of retreat into a block, and I can never see McAllister as a lone 6. So it'll be interesting just to see the makeup of how things happen. I think Szoboszlai has got comfortable minutes coming because he's one of the most versatile players in the squad now. I think he can play on the right side, which a lot of Liverpool's midfielders favour the left. He can play on the flanks, potentially even play as a false 9 if we want to experiment with that. So I think both of them players will nail it down really and become fixed members of the team. But the only question mark in my head regarding that is Curtis Jones and the fact he should be playing. And for me, picturing all three on the pitch at the same time, I'm not sure who's where, unless, I'm not sure who's where, to be honest.
You're not sure who's playing alongside Trent in the holding role?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. I mean, maybe you could play Szoboszlai as one of the forwards and play Jones and McAllister as the 2-8 or something like that. But this is where it all comes down to just like the fit and who's playing where. And like I agree on Thiago. I think Thiago's amazing. I've been a massive fan of him for years now. But I think just fit wise, where's he getting his minutes? That would be my question. Like, obviously he's played as an 8 for the past couple of seasons for Liverpool, but as more of like an 8 who stays exclusively in the middle third. Whereas now, though, if he's playing as an 8, he's expected to play as part of an attacking bank of 5. And for me, you want Thiago in your build up more than anything else. So there's loads of just unanswered questions at the minute, and I don't know. I don't know where I stand on like the 3 that you've mentioned as well. It's the 3 oldies. I don't know how I'd feel if we kept all 3. I mean, I do think we need to start cashing in on these players a little bit, but I think they can all help in their own individual ways. If you know what I mean, it's an interesting one.
I just think, can we keep letting players run out their contracts like again and again?
Oh, no, yeah, I agree.
At some point, we've got to rejuvenate the squad, and you've got to sell well and tough decisions. And I'm glad it's not my job. a lot of unanswered questions because we've not seen any of these players play together. It's a real summer of change, isn't it? I feel like obviously a month into the season we'll have a much better idea, but the thing for Jurgen is he's got to make these decisions now.
We're going to be zooming in on pre-season videos and pictures, aren't we? Seeing what everyone's up to. I can't wait for Liverpool to line up with 10 attackers on the pitch now, Alison, and everyone lose their mind. It's going to be great fun. We will look, Neil, at the defence finally, and the links to Cole will do persist. Fabrizio Romano said that Chelsea see him as a crucial player, though, and that the only way he leaves is if he pushes for a move. There were some interesting little social videos that everyone likes to cling on to, don't they, at the weekend? And do you think that he's a player that would fit into Liverpool's new system and potentially come in as a bit of a backup to learn from Virgil van Dijk and do that role in a few years' time?
Yeah, I think he's a fantastic talent. Again, with a really high ceiling. Everything I've seen of him, he just looks to me like he's England's best young centre half. And so I no doubt that he's a target. My question all along has been, how much is it going to take to force him out of Chelsea? Because obviously they've had a lot of issues financially. They've had to make a lot of sales, but it seems to have settled to an extent. I think it's going to take upwards of 50 million. And that's why I'm begrudgingly thinking we might need to sell one of these midfielders we've got accustomed and affection for. I think Cole will, his ability to be that left-hand side centre-half and then to maybe deputise even for Virgil is what really entices me to him as a player. And he's so good on the ball. He's strong. He just looks the real deal to me. And again, I'm just sort of left questioning why Chelsea aren't doing everything in their power to hold on to him. But he's a Liverpool fan, I'm led to believe, which is always
we always say everyone's a Liverpool
one
fan.
in our favour. I'm told he is. He's a Red. And obviously he's not had any minutes for Chelsea. And they've not got a reputation in recent years of developing young players, of giving young players the opportunities they should. And from the outside looking in, obviously they've appointed a great manager, a top manager, but the attraction of working with Jurgen Klopp has got to be there. So I think it's just a case of, can we fund this move and can they make it happen?
Yeah, and crucially, you can see a pathway for him, can't you? That's maybe what he hasn't got at Chelsea. He doesn't have a plan where he can see where he'd fit into the starting team or he can be really competing for a starting spot. But at Liverpool, you feel like, yes, maybe he'd have to bide his time and he'd have to learn from some of the best in the business, but you can see a clear path for him to follow.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the craziness of Chelsea, I just wouldn't believe for a second he'd be on the market. I can't believe that Pochettino has a choice. That he's a perfect Pochettino player in every way. And Pochettino would be sat down there going, who says you haven't got a pathway at Chelsea? I wasn't here. So I am now, and you're starting first game of the season. I've got no doubt that's what he'd want to say. I think Liverpool's best opportunity is whether the board are saying to Pochettino, you ain't got a choice. We've got to start cashing in. And he's one of the few players we've got which we can cash in on. And then the other weird tightrope that Liverpool walk, which I referenced on Lavia, is, Liverpool, I won't swear, Liverpool want good people, ultimately, and they don't sign people who they perceive not to be. So the problem is that Liverpool's best chance of getting him is for him not to be a very nice, professionally speaking, and kick up a massive storm and ultimately threaten to go on strike if he doesn't get his move. But then, if he does that to them, why wouldn't they do that to us, ultimately? And you go, well, so what? We'll come and win the league with us and we'll worry about that later to a degree. So I think that is only, there's a few moving parts there for me, and I think this is one that if it did happen would go late. I do think for all the, whether it be right or wrong, the negativity around FSG at times and things, I do think that, look, FSG can commit, because they're not committing all the dough at once. If FSG need to commit the dough for him over 5 years, they're as most likely to do it for him as anyone. When you're talking about a talent like him, a player like him, I do think if there's such a thing as Moneyball, it's with goalies and centre-backs. I think goalkeepers and centre-backs are hugely underrated. And I do think if there's a Moneyball area to this, it is I always think if there's a top centre-back and top goalkeeper, you just sign them. And if you've got to loan them out or do anything, they're just so few and far between. And then they've got to want to come to you. It's such a nightmare to get hold of them that I just think when they do, you've got to risk blowing the budget to get them. So I do think if there's a chance on this, I would be going all in on him if I was Liverpool. I think the politics of Pochettino and Chelsea are the key here for whether even there's a chance. Pochettino, if he's a good guy, Pochettino's just going to charm him, isn't he? And you wouldn't fault him if he goes, well, fine, you know, I'll give that a whirl with you for a season. What have I got to lose? He's got 2 years left on his deal, so they really do have to potentially flog him next year. So he has got a year to look at this. So I've got a bad feeling he just doesn't come on the market, I'm afraid. But I really hope he does. He'd be perfect for us, you know, as a deputy for Andy Robertson in this new system.
Yeah, Josh Robertson for me is the only player that really you can look at with a new system and say maybe it's not playing to his new strengths because he has to hold back a little bit more. He has to be a bit more defensive. Do you think him playing in a back three is kind of counterproductive to what he does best? And maybe that's why we are being linked to other players that can play on that left-hand side of defence?
Yeah, I think it is a little bit. I think, you know, depending on who Liverpool face, I think if we face the large majority of teams at Anfield, for example, I think we can pretty much put up with it and it gives us a bit more attacking firepower and things like that. But I think in a lot of games as well, it's kind of, it's pretty much given Konate far too much to do on the opposite side for me, because Virgil obviously took over to cover the space that Robertson's vacated by overlapping. And then if Konate's managing like the whole of the right side on his own, because Trent's also tucking into midfield. So I think it has been a problem at times, and at times I think we'd have benefited from fielding kind of like an actual wide centre-back on the left. But we haven't had that profile on the squad, and we haven't had. I think the last left-footed centre-back that we had was Ragnar Klavan, I think, off the top of my head. And if you look at the top of the Premier League, that's something that makes Liverpool like outliers really, and not particularly in a good way. Like obviously we've gotten away with it because of Virgil. He was right-footed, obviously, but his distribution has just been outstanding over the past few years. But if you look at like Arsenal, I've got Gabriel and the Polish lad is a Kiwi or something like that, Kiwior. Manchester United, Ten Hag very quickly got in Lisandro Martinez for that reason. Guardiola's got, well, he might have Guardiola soon. He's got Nathan Ake, he's got Laporte. Pau Torres is going to Aston Villa. Newcastle United got Sven Botman last summer. These are all left-footed centre-halves. Liverpool don't have any, so I think Colwell it'd be a massive fix for that in terms of addressing that void. And then on top of that, you would allow Liverpool to actually field a proper back three rather than kind of like a bit of a makeshift one on the left side. So yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I'm a big fan of Colwell, and I think we should, if there's even a chance of getting him, we should throw everything at him.
Yeah, big fan of Colwell, and allegedly he's a big fan of us. So we can end on that note. Thank you as ever for listening to the Anfield Wrap. Thank you to Neil, to Josh, to Sean, to Andy for producing, and Ash on the video. That has been your Anfield Wrap. Have a lovely week.